Hi, today I'm going to show you how to get root access to the Shenron 2 machine, which is the second machine in the Shenron series on Vulnhub. Let's get started. I'm going to assume if you're watching this video that you have already completed Shenron 1, so I'm also going to assume you know your host machine's network address. If you haven't, or you don't, I recommend that you do that one first. For now, I'm going to scan for my target machine the same way I did in the first machine, using the command nmap 10.0.2.0/24, and then do a more detailed scan on the identified host with the command nmap -A 10.0.2.35. Just like in the first machine, we have ports 22 and 80 open, but this time we also have an additional HTTP port open on port 8080. Let's check out our web servers by opening a browser and navigating to 10.0.2.35 for our default HTTP port and 10.0.2.35:8080 for our secondary port. The default port takes us to a page called Highlight by HTML5up, while the 8080 port takes us to a WordPress site for Shenron 2. At the moment, it doesn't load properly, so let's add Shenron to our hosts file. Run the command sudo nano /etc/hosts. In a new line, add our IP address 10.0.2.35 and the name Shenron. Hit Ctrl X to exit and Y to save. Refresh the WordPress page, and this time it loads properly. There doesn't appear to be anything immediately useful on the sites themselves, so let's do some directory enumeration. We can run GoBuster using the command gobuster -u http://10.0.2.35-w/user/share/wordlists/common.txt. That doesn't turn up a whole lot, so let's repeat the process for the secondary port using the same command as above, but this time specifying our 8080 port. This also comes up with a few results, including an admin login page, but as we don't have any credentials, there's nothing we can do with that yet. Now, because we know this page is using WordPress, we can use a tool called WPScan to search for vulnerabilities. If you want a full list of available parameters, you can use the command WPScan --help. Now, before we go any further, you need to know about API tokens. An API token is used to authenticate with the WordPress scan vulnerability database and allows the WPScan tool to use the most up-to-date information. It also serves as a way for the developers to track usage of the tool and ensure it isn't being misused. If you don't input an API token, the tool isn't going to show you any of the vulnerabilities. Fortunately, getting a token is easy. All you need to do is create an account on the WPScan site, don't worry, it's free, and you'll get a token which will allow you to use it up to 25 times per day. I'll put a link in the description, so if you haven't got a token, pause this video and go and get one now. With that sorted, let's run our scan with the command WPScan -API-token equals, then put your token in, --URL http://shenron:8080. This generates a long list of information to read through, but the bit we're interested in is right at the end in the plugins identified section. WPScan provides some links for more information, so we're going to follow the seclists link. This tells us that we can view local files by exploiting the AJAX path parameter, and they even provide us with a proof of concept. Copy the proof of concept text, head back to your shell and use the command curl, and then paste in the copied text, making sure to add in the host details before running the command. In our case, the host would be Shenron:8080. What this has done is let us view the /etc/password file, and if we look towards the bottom, we can see that it includes two users, Jenny and Shenron. Now that we have a viable username, we want a password to go with it. We are going to use Hydra to brute force crack the password for Jenny. To do so, we are going to use the command Hydra-L Jenny-P /user/share/wordlists/rocku.txt ssh:// Shenron -f. What this does is run the Hydra program with the specified username of Jenny, the password list rocku.txt, and in SSH mode against Shenron, which, because we added it to our hosts file earlier, the system knows is located at 10.0.2.35. Hydra will then systematically attempt to connect to Shenron via SSH using the username Jenny and every password contained within the rocku word list. Because we specified the -f option, Hydra will stop once it finds the first successful password. Now, the rocku list contains something like 14 million passwords, so brute forcing can be a very slow process depending on the power of your machine and how far down the list the correct password is. It might be worth trying a much smaller list of more common passwords first. Another option is to use a tool like Qul, which can be used to generate custom word lists. For today though, we can let Hydra do its thing, and after a few minutes it is successful and shows us that the password for Jenny is also Jenny. Now that we have a username and password, let's try to connect into our target machine. Use the command ssh jenny at Shenron. When prompted, enter the password Jenny. Now that we have user access, we need to find a way to escalate our privileges. I like to start with the command sudo -l to see whether the current user is able to run anything with admin privileges. In this case though, we don't have a sudo password, so that goes nowhere. Since we, that is to say Jenny, can't run anything with elevated permissions, we are instead going to search for SUID files. SUID stands for Set User ID, and it's a special permission type in which a file can be executed with the permission of the file owner rather than the permissions of the user running the file. To search for them, we can use the command find /-type f-perm -u equals s to >dev/null. In other words, find all files, the type f, starting in the root directory, the /, with SUID permissions. If you watched my previous video, you'll know that binaries can be a good place to look for exploit opportunities. We can see that our search has found one called execute. The first thing I do whenever I find a list of available binaries is to check GTFOBins, which is available on GitHub and is absolutely a resource you should have favorited. Unfortunately, execute doesn't appear on it, so we will need to take a closer look. If you try to read a binary file with the cat command, you're going to get an unreadable mess, so instead we want to use a handy little program called strings. Of course, strings isn't installed on the target machine, so we need to send it to our local machine first. Navigate to the binary folder with cd/user/bin, and then open up a port with the command python3-m http.server9876. On our host machine, we can then use the command wget http://shenron:9876/execute. With that done, let's examine it through strings with the command strings execute. The line we're really interested in is the one beginning in /user/bin/cp. I'm going to break down this series of commands one at a time so you can understand why this works. The first command is /user/bin/cp, /bin/bash/mnt/bash. What this does is copy, cp, the first object, /bin/bash, to the second object, /mnt/bash. The next command is /user/bin/chmod777/mnt/bash. In other words, use the change mode function to set the permissions for /mnt/bash to 777, which is read, write, and execute for all users. Next, we have /user/bin/chown Shenron:/mnt/bash. This changes ownership of /mnt/bash to the user Shenron and the group Shenron. Finally, we have the /user/bin/chmod u+s/mnt/bash. This is once again using the change mode function to set permissions for /mnt/bash, but this time we're giving it that special permission we saw earlier, SUID. So, in summary, the execute binary when run we'll copy the bash binary to a new location, change the owner to a user with elevated privileges, and then allow anyone to run that binary with that user's privileges. Now that we understand the principle, how do we actually do all of this? It's actually quite simple. Back on our target machine, let's run the execute binary by typing execute. That should have done all of the things we just talked about in the background. Next, let's see if we can open up a bash terminal with elevated privileges using the command /mnt/bash-p. Use the whoami command to verify that this shell is running as Shenron. This means that we can now run any command as Shenron. First though, let's go get our first flag. Use cd/home/shenron/desktop to change directories, and then use ls-all to list the contents. Incidentally, you don't actually need the two L's, you can just use -al, but I find it easier to remember as -all. Anyway, use cat local.txt to read the user flag. There is also a hidden file called parse, so let's read that one too with cat.parse. It's an encoded string, so first we need to work out what encoding algorithm was used, and then we can decrypt it. Copy the string, open up a web browser, and navigate to decode's cipher identifier. Paste the string and hit analyze. We can see that it is encrypted using base 32, so click on base 32, paste the string again, and hit decrypt. With that done, we can see what is fairly clearly the password for Shenron. Let's connect via SSH as the user Shenron with the command SSH Shenron@Shenron, and then paste the newfound password. Now that we are logged in as Shenron, we are going to follow the same process we did with Jenny, i.e. see what commands we have permission to run at sudo level. Use the command sudo-l. As it turns out, Shenron can run absolutely everything. So let's switch user to sudo with sudo su, then cd/root, ls to list the contents, and cat root.txt to read the root flag. So there you have it. We have achieved root access to Shenron 2. Let's break down how we did it. First, we used nmap to do a network scan and identify our target machine. Then, we did some directory enumeration using GoBuster. Next, we performed a vulnerability scan using WPScan and exploited a path traversal vulnerability to identify usernames. From there, we used Hydra to brute force crack the password for our identified user. Once logged in as that user, we were able to move laterally to a user with greater permissions by exploiting a binary with SUID permissions. Finally, we decrypted a password for that new user and used their elevated permissions to log in as the root user. I hope you enjoyed this video and found the explanations of the concepts behind what I'm doing helpful. If you have any particular machines you want me to try, or a particular style of attack you want explained, leave a comment and I'll see what I can do. Until then, good luck with your own hacking exploits.